Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where unexpected moments change lives. Today's story is about Ethan Williams, a millionaire who, as part of a bet, marries a woman who's nothing like what he expected. What starts as a challenge soon takes a surprising turn, revealing lessons that go far beyond money and appearances. Ethan Williams was not the kind of man who enjoyed losing. In fact, he couldn't remember the last time he had. At the age of 38, he had built a fortune from the ground up, becoming one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Los Angeles. His name was known in the boardrooms of the city's most exclusive companies, and his presence at any event turned heads. He wasn't a man who needed to prove anything, at least. That's what he liked to believe. It was a Friday evening when he found himself at a rooftop gathering in downtown Los Angeles. The view was nothing short of spectacular, with the city lights stretching out in front of him like an endless sea of possibility. The people around him were dressed in the finest suits, their laughter and chatter mingling with the clinking of champagne glasses. This was where the city's elite gathered, and Ethan was one of them. He was sipping his drink, surveying the crowd, when his good friend Matt Thompson approached. Matt was an old college buddy, a man with a penchant for stirring up trouble. As usual, Matt wore a devilish grin on his face, a sign that trouble was just around the corner. "Ethan, my man," Matt said, clapping him on the back. "I've got a challenge for you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. His interest piqued. "What kind of challenge?" Matt leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing some great secret. "I bet you wouldn't dare marry a woman who's not your type. Not someone from your circles. Not someone who fits the Ethan Williams mold." Ethan chuckled. "What's the catch?" "The catch," Matt said with a grin. $1 million. My friend, you marry her and stay married for 6 months. That's the deal." The words hung in the air for a moment. Ethan's mind went to work, calculating the odds. $1 million? It was hardly a challenge for someone like him. But the thought of marrying someone who didn't meet his high standards, someone who didn't belong in his world, was intriguing. He took a sip of his drink, eyeing Matt carefully. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Matt replied. "You win, and I hand you $1 million. You lose. Well, you'll owe me the same amount." Ethan thought for a moment. He wasn't sure what Matt had in mind, but the idea of marrying someone outside his usual circle sparked something in him. He had never backed down from a challenge, and this one would be no different. Besides, he could always find a woman who would fit the role of his wife for 6 months. After all, it was just a business transaction in the end, and who knew? Maybe he could make this marriage work to his advantage in the long run. "All right," Ethan said, his decision made. "I'm in." Matt's grin widened, and he gave Ethan a playful shove. "You're on, my friend. I'll set it up. You won't regret it." Later that evening, the conversation shifted to more trivial matters. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation that had settled in his chest. $1 million was a tempting prize, but the real intrigue lay in the woman Matt would find for him. Someone who wasn't part of his polished, high society world. A woman who would challenge him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The next week, Ethan received a message from Matt. It was short and to the point. "I've found her." Ethan's curiosity grew as he read the message again. Who could this woman be? Someone who didn't fit into his world of wealth and luxury. Someone who could be the perfect candidate for his little experiment. His mind ran through the possibilities, but nothing seemed to fit. He had dated a variety of women, all of whom were beautiful, intelligent, and successful in their own right. But none of them were quite like the one Matt was about to introduce him to. That afternoon, they met at an upscale restaurant in Beverly Hills. Ethan was already there when Matt arrived, and the two exchanged a brief handshake before Matt motioned toward the door. "She's here," Matt said. Ethan turned to see a woman standing at the entrance. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen before, tall, confident, with an air of independence that radiated from her. She wore no designer dress, no glamorous accessories, just a simple black blouse and a pair of jeans. Her hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto Ethan's as she walked toward him. "This is Amanda Brooks," Matt said, gesturing to the woman. "Amanda, this is Ethan Williams." Amanda extended her hand without hesitation. Nice to meet you, Ethan. I'm well aware of the bet, she said, her voice cool and composed. There was no nervousness, no uncertainty in her tone, just pure confidence. Ethan took her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip. I'm sure you are, he replied, though he couldn't help but feel a bit off balance. Amanda wasn't like any woman he had ever met before. She wasn't fazed by the surroundings, by the opulence of the restaurant, or by the attention Ethan's wealth usually commanded. Shall we sit? Amanda asked, taking a seat before Ethan could offer to pull out her chair. She didn't wait for his approval, and somehow, that made her even more intriguing. As the dinner went on, Ethan learned more about Amanda. She was independent, intelligent, and completely uninterested in the things that Ethan considered valuable. She didn't care for luxury, for wealth, or for status. Her focus was entirely on her own life, her career, and her independence. And that, to Ethan's surprise, was exactly what intrigued him. He had never met anyone like her, a woman who wasn't impressed by his wealth, who wasn't eager to please him or win his favor. She wasn't like the women he was used to dating, women who would flatter him and agree with everything he said. No, Amanda had her own mind, and she wasn't afraid to speak it. As they sat in the restaurant, Ethan's mind raced. This marriage, this game, was going to be more difficult than he had anticipated. And in the back of his mind, a question began to form. Could he actually make this work? Could he marry someone like Amanda? Someone so different from the women he usually surrounded himself with? Could he stay married to her for 6 months? And would he even want to? The challenge was set, and Ethan had accepted. His mind raced with thoughts of how he would win this bet. But as the days passed, he found himself more intrigued by the woman Matt had mentioned than he had initially anticipated. Ethan prided himself on being a man of control. His life was planned, organized, and anything outside that structure was nothing more than a minor distraction. But this woman, whoever she was different. She was going to be a pawn in his game, just another piece to move around, or so he thought. The night of the first meeting came faster than Ethan had expected. Matt had arranged the dinner at a trendy upscale restaurant in the heart of the city, a place that catered to the upper crust of society. The air inside was thick with sophistication, waiters in black suits gliding from table to table, the hum of hushed conversations, the clinking of fine china. Ethan arrived on time, as always, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his demeanor impeccable. The evening was his. Then she walked in. Amanda Brooks was not the woman Ethan had imagined. She didn't carry herself like one of the glossy models or high-powered socialites he was used to. No, Amanda was grounded, her presence calm, confident, and not at all impressed by the luxury surrounding her. She wore a simple red dress, nothing like the gowns that usually grace this place. Her brown hair cascaded around her shoulders in soft waves, and her eyes, dark and intelligent, held a certain sharpness, like she could see right through him. She wasn't wearing a single piece of jewelry, something Ethan would have found strange. But somehow, it made her more striking. Amanda's gaze met his, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a pang of uncertainty. This wasn't just some casual meeting for a bet. He was suddenly aware of the weight of the moment. The power of this woman who didn't seem to care at all about the wealth and privilege he wore like a second skin. Mr. Williams, she said coolly, her voice steady, eyes never leaving his. I assume you're here for the same reason I am? Ethan blinked, momentarily taken aback by her directness. Yes, I suppose we are, he replied, trying to regain his composure. Shall we sit? As they took their seats, the conversation quickly turned to the terms of the bet. Ethan tried to approach it with his usual charm, but Amanda wasn't having any of it. She wasn't fazed by his wealth, nor was she interested in impressing him. She was there for one reason, to fulfill her side of the agreement and, in her words, not to be played. I'm not the kind of woman who's easily manipulated. Mr. Williams, she said, her voice unwavering. If you think I'm going to fall for your tricks or be dazzled by your money, you're sadly mistaken. Ethan studied her for a moment. This was no ordinary woman. She didn't flinch when he made his usual boasts about his success. She didn't even seem remotely interested in the luxury of his life. It was both refreshing and frustrating at the same time. Let's be clear, Amanda continued. I don't need your money, and I don't need your lifestyle. 6 months is 6 months, and I'll walk away from this unscathed. I'm here because I'm fulfilling a contract. And that's it. Ethan leaned back in his chair, impressed by her no-nonsense attitude. He had met countless women who were enamored by his status. Women who would have jumped at the chance to marry him, even if it was just for the money or the prestige. But Amanda wasn't interested in any of that. And for some reason, that made her all the more intriguing to him. Fair enough, he said with a smile. I admire your independence. Amanda didn't smile back. Instead, she studied him closely, her gaze unwavering. Don't mistake my independence for weakness. Mr. Williams, you're not going to control me, no matter how much money you have. As the evening wore on, the tension between them grew. Ethan was used to getting his way, used to having everything under his control. But this was different. Amanda wasn't impressed by his wealth, nor was she interested in playing the role of the doting wife. She had made it clear that this was just a business deal to her. And somehow, that made Ethan even more determined to win her over. But the more he tried, the more he realized that Amanda was not the type of woman who could be won over easily. She wasn't interested in his extravagant gifts, his fancy penthouse, or his glossy lifestyle. Amanda was a woman of substance, a woman who knew what she wanted and what she didn't want. And in that moment, Ethan found himself fascinated by her strength, her independence, and the challenge she presented. What started as a simple bet was quickly becoming something more. Ethan had agreed to marry Amanda for 6 months. But already, he felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't expected: admiration. Would he win this bet? Or would Amanda prove that he couldn't control everything, not even in the game he had created? As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself unable to shake off the thoughts of Amanda. She was nothing like the women he had known in his life. Nothing like the high-powered businesswomen or models who frequented the circles he moved in. She was grounded, focused on her work, and fiercely independent. Ethan had expected to win her over with grand gestures. But Amanda rejected all of it, every lavish gift, every extravagant dinner, every attempt to impress her. Their conversations often turned to the stark contrast between their lives. Amanda spoke openly about her humble beginnings, the struggle she'd faced growing up in a small town, and how she'd built her life on her own terms. She was no stranger to hard work and perseverance, and her ideals were a far cry from the shallow world Ethan inhabited. He had always prided himself on his success, but in Amanda's presence, it felt hollow, like something he had achieved out of habit rather than true desire. On the surface, everything about their marriage was a facade, a game to win a bet. But as the days passed, something began to shift. Ethan found himself wanting to know more about Amanda, wanting to understand the woman who had managed to captivate him without even trying. Her presence in his life was becoming more than just an inconvenience, and the walls he'd built around himself were starting to crumble. One brick at a time. One night, after a particularly quiet dinner, Amanda spoke up. They were sitting in the living room of Ethan's penthouse, the city lights casting a soft glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. You know, she said, her voice low but steady, I didn't expect this to be easy, but I never expected to feel like this either. This marriage, or whatever you want to call it, isn't what I thought it would be. And you, Ethan, are not who I thought you were. Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowed. What do you mean by that? Amanda met his gaze, her eyes soft but direct. I thought you were just a man who needed to win. I thought you'd do anything to prove yourself. But you're more than that, aren't you? You're not just some guy who plays games for the thrill of it. You're a man who's hiding from something bigger than all this. She motioned around at the luxurious penthouse, the opulence of it all. I think you're running away from something, from the truth, from yourself. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his mind racing. He had never allowed anyone to see that side of him, the vulnerable part that wasn't so sure of himself. He had built his empire with hard work, with ruthless decisions, and he had convinced himself that his wealth made him whole. But Amanda's words hit too close to home. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had been running from something he couldn't face. Amanda, he began, his voice softer than usual. I didn't expect this either. But you're wrong about one thing. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I'm not just doing this to prove something. I'm not even sure I know why I accepted the bet at first. But I can tell you this. I've never met anyone like you. And I've never felt so alive. When I'm with you, it's different. I don't feel like I'm playing a game anymore. Amanda's eyes softened. And for the first time, she saw the man behind the suit. The man behind the calculated persona. Ethan wasn't just a millionaire businessman trying to win a bet. He was a man who had built a life of success, but was secretly longing for something real. The 6-month mark approached quickly, and both of them were forced to confront the truth. What was this marriage? What had it become? Ethan had gone into it thinking it was a game, a challenge, something to win for the thrill. But now, he realized it had become more than that. He didn't want to lose Amanda, not now that he'd seen who she really was and what they could have together. One evening, just a few days before their marriage was set to end, Ethan took Amanda by the hand and led her to the rooftop of his penthouse. The city skyline stretched out before them, the lights twinkling like stars in the distance. Amanda, he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. I've learned more about myself in these past 6 months than I ever thought possible. You've taught me that life isn't about winning, and it's not about the money or the status. It's about something much deeper. It's about connection. It's about being real, and I don't want to lose that. Amanda looked at him, her expression unreadable. Ethan could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment of truth. Would she walk away, as she had always said she would? Or would she stay, willing to see what they could become? Amanda, I know this started as a bet, but I want to make it real. I want to make it ours. I want to build something that lasts, something that's worth more than all the money in the world. Amanda stood there, silent for a long moment. Ethan held his breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she spoke. Ethan, I never wanted this to be about a bet, and I never thought I'd say this. But maybe we've both been playing games all along. Maybe it's time we stop playing and start living. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to take the chance with you. And in that moment, Ethan realized that what had started as a game, a bet to prove his worth, had turned into something real, something far more valuable than he had ever imagined. The game was over, but their story was just beginning. Thank you for watching today's story. Ethan's journey reminds us that true connections go beyond superficial expectations, and life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate your support. See you next time.